Hey, good evening all. Welcome to my talk about securely accessing Google Cloud from HCP Terraform. My name is Jorge Calo and I will tell you everything about it. Let me first introduce myself. I'm the practice lead for Google Cloud Security at Xebia. Besides that, I'm also Google Cloud Security Architect, meaning that I help our customers design and build secure solutions on Google Cloud. I'm also a Google Cloud Trainer, so helping sure that we can enable our customers to do it themselves, creating secure cloud environments. And what I really love is bring people together around the Google Cloud topics in our Google Cloud user group, Benelux, that we organize at Xebia, but also together with Google and HashiCorp. So let's see what to expect today during our talk. First, I'm going to talk about the problems. What problem do we face when it comes to securely accessing Google Cloud and connected to HCP Terraform? Of course, we don't want to talk only about problems, also solutions. So I'm going to tell you more about Workload Identity Federation. What is it and how can you use it? Another one is how to scale this solution that we're going to share with you tonight for the enterprise. And of course, I'm going to show you a demo. How can you use it? Terraform Cloud together with Google Cloud. So let's first start with the problem, right? Already mentioned a bit. The problem is that service account keys are not secure. So what's the problem? Well, first of all, is the thing when your service account key gets compromised, right? If a hacker gets your key, he's able to provision resources in your Google Cloud, destroy existing resources. And it's also one of the reasons where you see things like crypto mining, that kind of stuff going on in your Google Cloud environment. And one of the other things that causes a problem is that sometimes, due to security reasons, some organization already applied the organizational policy to block the usage of service account keys. So you're not able to export them and to use them. So how are you able to connect them to external platforms? So what are we actually looking for, right? We discussed what the problems are. We're actually looking for short-lived tokens with limited permissions. So actually we want to have our tokens that are unique for each Terraform run and that have a short lifespan. I think that's really important. And another one is that we want to have granular access. So applying the principle of least privilege, making sure that we are able to impersonate service account that has limited permissions. And in case that a token gets exposed, then we minimize the blast radius. So that's about the problem. Let's look a bit what solution do we have. Workload Identity Federation. That's a Google Cloud native solution that helps to federate identities on Google Cloud. Let's take a look. What is it? Well, first of all, Workload Identity is the way for keyless authentication in Google Cloud. The platform that provides an OIDC endpoint can integrate with Workload Identity Federation. And what's really nice, it is based on OAuth 2.0. Meaning that Workload Identity on Google Cloud is based on the OAuth 2 token exchange, and it gives a token back to the OIDC endpoint. Meaning that in this way, you're able to impersonate the service account that you can run with limited permissions and provision your resources on Google Cloud. It works with different platforms that support OIDC. So of course, HCP Terraform, but also Git, Kubernetes, AWS and Azure. Think about the Active Directory. So let's zoom it out to the high-level architecture, right? Here you see the HCP Terraform on the left and the Google Cloud on the right. So what do you actually see happening? I see a few dots on the map starting with the workloads. So the first thing that we need to do in order to make this solution work is to create a workload identity pool in your Google Cloud platform. That's step one. And you also see the workloads in the Terraform side. That's actually the workloads where you have the workspaces, where you actually want to run your Terraform plans. So if we look for the second part, is where the app needs to authenticate with the identity provider, where it can receive the account credentials. That's the second step. So let's look at the third step, because what will happen, the app calls the security token service on the Google Cloud sides, and it will get a short-lived Google Cloud access token. Okay, nice. But what will then happen is on the side of the HCP Terraform, where the dynamic provider credential is in place, that will help you and use the token to impersonate the service account that's on the Google Cloud side. And I think that really shows the magic combined with the workspaces, what I'm going to tell you a bit more about it. So that's high-level solution of Google Cloud Workload Identity Federation. So let's make it a bit more concrete. Let's look at the building block that we have in place. So if you want to get started, I have actually created a repo and also Terraform Workspaces based on those two folders. So it's a repo with a setup WIF, Workload Identity Federation, and the one to actually use it and consume the service. And I'm going to walk you through the code and also show in the demo how you can use it. So let's start with a setup, right? Because before we can start using Workload Identity Federation, we need to make sure that we have already a connection between HTTP Terraform and Google Cloud. We do that by leveraging in the first place a service account key. That's the thing what we need to do in order to make sure that it has established connection. So let's dive in. So one of the first steps that we need to do, as mentioned before in the high-level solution, is create a Workload Identity Federation pool. Well, you actually see it right here, right? What we actually recommend is to create non-Google Cloud environments that they get their own pool. So here we see it, right? HTTP Terraform pool. You just see the ID, display name, description, and the resource is the IAM Workload Identity pool. So that's step one. So let's take it a step further, right? Because now we need to actually create the Workload Identity Federation provider. We see it right here, the resource within Terraform. And if you look on the screen, the really important stuff, what we see here, specifically looking at the attribution, the attribute conditions, and also the mapping. And I'm also going to show them to you looking on the deployed resources on Google Cloud. But what's really most important, what this is doing, it will make sure that it will map the Terraform Workspace, so that's allowed and the organization to actually work together with Google Cloud and authenticate against it. So that's really attribute mapping, the most important part that's happening here in the federation provider. Other thing already mentioned, we want to make sure that not all workspaces in the connected Terraform organization are able to execute and authenticate against a Google Cloud. So I want to make sure we can control it, right? So how to verify that? That's actually where this part of the code comes into play. Here we see, for example, the workspace IDs that I have specified here. That's actually one of the use Workload Identity Federation workspace in Terraform. You'll see it also during the demo. I've defined here the ID, so that's a really important one, not the name. And if you go back all the way down, they actually see the mapping of the member. That's part of the IAM member. You can see them here. And I also match it against the Workload Identity pool and together with the workspace ID. So that's really a really important one. And actually, you might wonder, hey, the Workload IDs above, that's actually part of the locals where we define the workspace IDs. So in the Git repository, you also see the code, so you can use it from there. So, and the final part I mentioned is actually the mapping of the attributes from the Workload Identity Federation against the workspace IDs in Terraform. So that's really important to check that out. So we discussed about that we want to impersonate a service account. Then of course the most important thing is to start creating a service account. That's actually what we do on this part of the presentation. Here you see the resource. We're going to create a service account in Google Cloud, example one. And on the bottom you actually see that we're also granting specific permissions to this service account, the one that we will impersonate during the Terraform run or apply. So it's really important here that we don't give them too much permission. So this is about a storage admin, and luckily you see here we don't assign the owner or the editor permission. So that's really nice. We limit the permissions for the service account that will impersonate. So now we talked about setup of the Workload Identity Federation with Terraform, the steps I just discussed. Now we're going to look into how to use it. How can we consume Workload Identity Federation in our Terraform workspace? Well, actually, here we have it. Let's walk it through. So here we start with the locals. Again, we define what Google Cloud Project ID, what bucket name, the prefix we want to use, because they need to be unique, of course, within Google Cloud. I have a little randomizer of the ID, just to make sure it is unique. And then, of course, the most important part, we're actually creating the Google Cloud Storage bucket, the naming convention, the region, and of course, referring back to the Google Cloud Project ID where we want to create it. And actually, that's it. That's actually how we can consume and use the Workload Identity Federations in a different workspace within Terraform. So you can imagine, is that all that we need, right? There must be some magic in the Terraform provider. Well, let's take a look, right? Because this is actually where the magic happens. Here you see actually the sequence. And let's take a better look actually at it, because what we here see, we have the Terraform agent on the right. Hope we can see it there all the way in the top. The Terraform agent calls the Google Cloud Workload Identity Federation actually to obtain the federated token. So that's actually what's happening in the first part. Then you have the federated token that's passed on to the Google Cloud Terraform provider. That's the one you see in the middle. The Google Cloud Terraform provider then impersonates a service account to obtain the temporary credential that you see there almost at the bottom left. And that's actually being used to obtain the credential when applying or planning the Terraform. So I think that's really important, and this is actually where the real magic happens. And this magic is possible because it's a dynamic provider credentialed from Terraform. Coming back to the provider, that's actually where magic happens, right? So, but of course, I want to show you how does the provider config looks for the usage of the workload identity federation in this specific workspace. Well, here we see it. So, of course, we're leveraging Terraform Cloud. I here define the organization of the Terraform. The workspace, of course, that's really important because that's actually how we distinct them. We have the setup workload identity federation, and of course also the use one, and then we have the required provider. And actually that's it. So you don't see anything, no reference to some keys, because it's all keyless, and it's all being done through the variables, but I will tell you a bit more about that. Moving on, if we want to look like this is a solution, right? How to set it up and how to consume it, but how can you scale this for enterprise? Because there's a great way within HTTP Terraform to scale this and delegate the access to other workspaces so that they can also consume the identity workload federation. So in order to scale this for enterprise and delegate it to other workspaces in Terraform, what we need is variable sets. We can create them in HTTP Terraform, and here you see them on the screen, right? So we're creating the variable set to make sure that we have the name there, and onto the sets we can connect the different variables. So I have the provider authenticator, that's one part. Then we're moving on because we also have the service account email, that's one of the things, and you see we mentioned it, we marked it as sensitive, that's really important here. And the other one is the provider name, we also mark this one as sensitive. So that's actually where creating the variable set. And of course the next step is actually, when we have created a variable set, is actually to share it within Terraform and to other workspaces. So what we see here, we want to share it. So for every workspace that we have, workspace ID that we have defined in Terraform, we want to make sure that they're able to exit. So here you see it, we have the workspace variable set, that's one part. And we say for each workspace ID. So in the locals, you see down below, we again defined here the workspace ID. So not the name, but the workspace ID of the Terraform workspace. So that's really important. And in this case, we're able to share it only to the ones that are defined here. Okay, so to wrap it up, let's go to a demo where I'll show you HashiCorp Terraform and also Google Cloud Console, the resource that we deployed with the code that I showed you. Here we have the code here. This is the one to actually set up the workload identity federation. Okay, so now we're at the demo part. We're going to walk you through the code and in the end also show the results in HTTP Terraform and also in Google Cloud. So here we see in the code the local variables is actually for the setup of the workload identity federation Terraform plan. Here you see the organization that I have assigned to it because that's actually where the project lives. Here we have the workspace IDs. Actually, these are the workspace IDs. Those are the one in Terraform that are able to use our variable set. We'll cover that in a second. Of course, we first need to create the workload identity federation pool, as mentioned before. So here we have the pool. And then actually the magic happening here at the pool provider that we create in HTTP Terraform. And I think that it's really important to mention the mapping of the attributes, right? So we have the one on the Google side, and we want to make sure that we map them for the full workspace, the workspace IDs of Terraform, so they are the one that are able to access and consume the workload identity federation. And of course, we also have the easier URI, that's the one, the app.terraform.io, really important one to mention that one. And then, of course, now we have the pool and the provider. Of course, what we want to do, we want to make sure that HTTP Terraform is able to impersonate the service account. But then, of course, we need to start with creating the service account. So here we see the service account that we create here. Moving on, we want to make sure that we grant the service account the correct permissions. So for this demo, what I'm going to do, I'm going to assign them the storage admin because I want to make sure that we can create a cloud storage bucket. and we want to delegate this access to another workspace. So that's something that I'm going to show you in a second. So that's what's happening here, right? The granting the permissions, so we don't use owner, no editor permissions, something like that. So really the right amount of privileges for our task that we want to do. So, and here what we do here, in the IAM member, we want to make sure that only the workspace IDs that we have are the ones that are allowed to impersonate the account. So here we actually have it. You see the identity pool. So we want to make sure to check, hey, is it the same identity pool? And of course also the workspace IDs. So only those are the ones that are able to impersonate the service account within Google Cloud and provision the resources. So we covered the granting the permissions. And then the other part that we need to do is create a variable set. Why do we need to create a variable set? As mentioned before, if you have multiple workspaces or multiple teams, if you're 1, 2 engineers or even 1,000, what's really important that you're able to delegate access in a scalable way. And workspaces are able to help you combined with the variable set. So here we create the variable set. So we give it your name. And good to know is that we already define organization. Why is it? Because the variable set lives within HTTP Terraform on the organizational level, and from there you can delegate the access to other workspaces. So here, of course, we define what type of variables do we want to provision. First of all is the provider authenticate. Then we have the account email for the GCP run service account, and we also have the provider name. Really good to mention is that the account email and also the provider name, those are actually mentioned as sensitive, marked as sensitive to make sure that we keep it safe. So, and then of course, what we need to do, we need to make sure to bind it, right? To make sure that the workspace that we have, so we have 2 workspaces to begin with, and also in this demo, one is to set up workload identity federation and the other one is to use it. And here we're going to share the variable set that we created on org level, and to make sure it's able to be consumed by the workspace IDs for each of them that we defined in the locals. And short heads up, let me go up. Whoop, here we have it again. So that's actually part that we covered, the first part, to set up workload identity federation. So we've just showed you how to set up workload identity federation, and now we're going to move on how to consume workload identity federation in your other workspace. And you might wonder, Jorge, why do you have at least 2 workspaces? One to set it up and the other one to use it. Well, the reason is that you can actually separate the managing of the authentication part, for example, to your security or platform team, and the engineers you can assign to specific workspaces, and they don't have to worry about authentication, right? So they can work autonomous, just doing their things that they want to do in a secure way, and you can keep that authentication part towards Google Cloud centrally in your other workspace. So looking at the consuming part, right, where we can use workload identity federation, you have the local variables, right? We refer to the Google Cloud project and the bucket name, because as mentioned before, we actually want to create a cloud storage bucket. Want to make sure that it says a randomized name, right, because it should be unique. And actually here we have the creation of the cloud storage bucket. And you might wonder, what is this everything? Well, actually, this is it, right? If I go to the provider of the use workload identity federation, you see, of course, we have the organization part and the workspace. But actually, that's it. That's actually referring to the magic that we talked about, right? So this is actually part of the demo in the Visual Studio Code. Let's move on to HashiCorp, to HTTP Terraform. So what we see here, if you never used it before, here we see the workspaces, right? So we have 2 different workspaces. One where you can set it up and manage all the authentication, right? The workload identity federation. And you also see the second workspace, the use workload identity federation. You can give it to your team, right? Delegate the access. And I'm also going to show you the part of the shared variable sets. So here we have the run, and of course they were successfully finished. So we're also going to show you in Google Cloud how the resources are actually there. So this is the overview, right, of the workspaces. So what I'm first going to show you, here we have the variable set. That's pretty cool, because one of the things that I show you in the code is that we actually delegated to specific workspaces. We used, of course, the workspace IDs in Terraform, and here you see the functional name of it. You see it's only applied to that workspace or project. Here we have the variables. So the thing is, I mentioned some of the variables need to be mentioned as sensitive, right, to mark. So for example, if we want to click on this one, edit the variable, you don't see anything, right? But that's of course only one part of the puzzle. Because if I go to the other workspace, this is the use one. So this is actually where we want to consume a workload identity federation as a separate team, right? Imagine you're an engineering team. You want to make sure you're just able to deploy with Terraform. And I go here to the variables. Then actually here you see them. And those are actually inherited from the org level. Here you see variable sets. And of course, that was only possible because I mentioned the ID and the mapping. So this workspace is able to use it. And also here you see these variables are marked as sensitive and I'm not able to see them. Yeah, so it's actually part in the workspace, and here you see just the plans, Terraform plans that are there and they are run. So that's one part. So let's move on to Google Cloud Console to see actually what happened there. So here we have it. Here we're in the Google Cloud Console, and I went to IAM because Workload Identity Federation is part of identity access management, right? It's all the identities and making sure they can authenticate. So here you have it. Here of the pool that has been created, and of course also the provider. If I click on edit, you might see some familiar settings. For example, the issuer URL. We see it here referring to Terraform, HTTP, Terraform. Oh, it's of course enabled. Here you see the attribute that I showed you in code. Here we see them. And of course, here you'll see the mapping towards the Terraform organization. So that's one of them. If you go back. So here we also have the connected service accounts. And that's actually the service account that we have created and the one that we want to impersonate. You also see that this service account, as mentioned, is only allowed by the workspace ID that we mentioned. And actually, you can see it right here. This is actually workspace ID from Terraform that's allowed to impersonate this service account. So let's take a look actually if it actually was provisioned, right? So we talked about creating a cloud storage bucket. Here we go. There it is. HashiTalks folder it is with a unique identifier. So this is a storage bucket. And if I go to permissions, whoop, you actually see the service account for HTTP Terraform. And it has the proper permissions, the storage admin as we assigned and declared in the code. So that's actually the part in the Google Cloud Console. So what I showed you in the demo from looking at the code in Visual Studio, then going to HTTP Terraform, seeing in the console how is everything being configured, how we share the variable sets to a different workspace, and also how everything has been deployed in Google Cloud. Now we're almost ready at the end of the talk, and let's take that back. What have we discussed? So the first thing that we covered were the security risks of using service account keys, right? That was the first part. But also we talked how can you use workload identity federation to actually authenticate without keys. Third part we covered is how can you scale this, right? I mentioned scaling for the enterprise, but actually it's also if you're with one or two developers, you're able to set it up in a great way where you separate the setup of the workload identity federation and also the usage. So the developers can do the great things and don't have to worry about authentication. And finally, you've seen this all in action. I hope you enjoyed the talk. My name is Jorge Liao and let's connect. You have the QR code and the link to my LinkedIn profile, but also to the GitHub repository where you can find all the sample code showed during the talk. And thank you very much.